We're very fortunate on this show to have some of the world's best athletes, sports people, coaches, people in the field of sport, and across a different range of areas too. We've interviewed some of the world's leading people in their different fields. Today, we have a very fascinating guest. We've had the first opportunity to see him speak and deliver a seminar, which was riveting, to say the least, just really, really riveting. So we're very fortunate to have today's guest on the show. He's a football technical consultant. He's worked with some of the world's best, but let him sort of give you more of an insight, because I can't do our following guest enough justice who he's worked with. So I'm going to get him to give you a bit of an insight into his work, and he's going to give us an insight into what it's like doing the job he does, and a few tips here and there. So Mark, Rees, welcome to the show. Great to have you on board.
Thank you for having me on, mate. It's lovely to talk to you again.
Great, Mark. And I mean, for yourself, Mark, for our listeners, obviously there'll be a lot of listeners who are aware of where you've worked and the players you work with, but for some of them who might not be aware, can you give them a bit of insight into your background?
So my background is, as any aspiring young boy or girl, I've always wanted to be in football. I always wanted to be a footballer. I ended up signing Crewe Alexander when I was young, really young, and I ended up spending like 8-9 years there at a football club. And unfortunately, I was at a point where 16, 17, I had a couple of major surgeries, injuries, and I don't think my heart was in it as much. And in that time period, I moved from where I lived in South Manchester to go into digs. So I actually moved from home to focus on being a professional footballer at a young age. And when I was at Crewe at the time, I spent a lot of time with, and my coach for a long time was a guy called Steve Holland, who is now the assistant England manager. And what happened was I had Steve basically for 3-4 years as a coach. Yeah. And then when I got my injuries, what happened was the club were trying to look after me, as in, like, I was a young boy, I was keen, I was bored in the evenings because I trained during the day, and I was just whacking balls into the net, and I was probably just damaging my body even more. This is before sports science and things like that what come into play now. So what they did to cover my time was drag me into coaching, which then was the start of a new lease of life for me, which I became really passionate about. I ended up working in the academy, setting up like the under 6 and under 7s. There was no under 6 and under 7s there at the time. The group of people we had at Crewe, some of them have now gone on to be some of the world's best coaches, but they started at a League 2 club where the academy was imperative to give a flow of players to the first team. And it was a fantastic place to work. And then basically outside of that, set a coaching business up, which probably became to be one of the first private football coaching academies in the country. And in that time, as well as working at Crewe, I had players who were going to Man United, Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal. They were going all over the show, Man City. And some of them players from my own private academies now are currently some of the biggest players in the world, from the likes of the Phil Fodens, Cole Palmers. There's lads who are playing throughout every level of football in the country, from non-league all the way through to the Premiership. Some are currently playing England internationals. And then outside of that, I got to the point where my coaching business was growing, and it was becoming more diverse. We were going into schools, we were going into nurseries, and I really, really enjoyed having a vast variety of not just working with elite athletes, but working with just people and children who love sport. And, as well as working with some of the world's best, which I'll go into, I really enjoyed being in the playgrounds, tying the laces, being creative with trying to engage 4 or 5-year-old kids. And, I became really passionate about developing a skill set where you're not just working with one specific area. You can diverse and you can multitask. So then what happened was with the professional side, I got to the point where the business was really becoming demanding, and I stepped back and which some people thought was crazy, but the one thing what I always wanted to be was the best coach I could be, and to be able to do that, meeting head teachers, going in schools, covering coaching sessions for coaches not turning up, that wasn't helping me develop. So then I actually went to Blackburn Rovers when they were in the Premier League, and I took a full-time role there, which I was there for 2-3 years. And then with the owners of the club changing, the Venkis, there was a bit of an issue regarding the financial side, and I ended up leaving there and going to Israel, and I went to Maccabi Tel Aviv, and the manager of Maccabi Tel Aviv at the time was Jordi Cruyff, and the other guy was Oscar Garcia, who became the manager of Brighton. Did a couple of months there, wasn't really for me, and then the only club really what could bring me back was either Chelsea and City, and I ended up going to Man City and spending 9.5 years there in various different roles, and from on the back of that, done some consultancy work, was up at Villa, and then supported a lot of other people, players, agents, football associations, organisations as a football consultant, and that's currently what I do.
That's amazing journey, Mark, that you've had, and no doubt that journey's brought a lot of learnings and a lot of highlights. And what would you say some of the highlights have been? I mean, you've had the fortune to work with some of the world's best clubs and players as well, and you've mentioned there sort of working in schools and working across the different levels of the game. But in terms of your own sort of highlights for our listeners, Mark, what would you say the highlights have been for you thus far?
I think one of the highlights and the most refreshing things was, as a young person, being in a game which is so competitive, and I knew I had the ability to be in, but physically I just couldn't. I couldn't sustain the level of what I needed to for me to be the best version of me. Now, a lot of people used to say to me, "Look, the version you are, you're going to make it," but I knew that isn't how I played and how I wanted to be. So it was finding something which was so rewarding again, and something what I was so invested in was coaching. And it's probably one of the biggest things is seeing young children who, some kids, it was their first ever coaching sessions, the first time they see me. Now, some of them are the biggest names in the game, and seeing them being from children to growing up, to being scholars, to playing for the countries, to, being successful in other ways, gaining sponsorships, to then growing up, having their own families, and seeing people not just develop as footballers, but as individuals, that's most definitely for me, still to this day, still 20 years ago when I started doing this, is why I do what I do every day.
And just on that, Mark, I mean, obviously, sort of like, the time that we have this week, we probably won't be able to cover all of it, but you mentioned there sort of doing what you do on a daily basis, and just for our listeners who want to know more about, I'm sure there's no 2 days the same, but what do you generally do, like, as a consultant? I mean, is it sort of hands-on coaching? Is it sort of working with, like, coaches and manager? How does it work?
So there's basically, like, there's two sides to myself. There's Mark Rees as a technical consultant, and then I have a company which is called the Resilience Project. Obviously, my name's Mark Rees. The word resilient, we played on the word a little bit and called it Resilience, and we've developed we've developed a program, we've developed a mentoring scheme, we've developed various charitable projects we have, and inclusive projects which cater for most people around football, because that's my background and other people's backgrounds. And my time goes into, like, how we met, presenting, speaking with football clubs, sporting organisations, elite coaches, upcoming coaches, as in people who are just starting out on the journey, developing, helping, supporting parents, supporting players, collectively and individually. And I have a team of people who, I'd like to think are really specialist and experienced within that area. Regarding what I do with myself, I have a group of clients which I I've known some of these people since they are really young. Some of these people I've worked with them for 5, 6, 7 years, even when I worked at football clubs, and that's developing them individually to be the best they can be, technically, tactically, psychologically, and physically, where we can help them. And you know, some of the stuff what we do is for certain individuals who are out the game, who need to keep working and working at a high level. Some of them are out the game who want to develop before they go back in the game, and some who are currently in the game and are full-time players, or you know, part-time players in the game who want to get an edge, want to maintain the levels, want to keep developing, and are committed. You know, are committed and working with, you know, people on the grass, working with people sitting down, analysing the games, working with people and watching their games, giving them honest, you know, not biased feedback. Just, you know, the time what I have with them isn't around the football club. The time I have with them is around that individual, because the football club, there's a time which they will come to an end of where they're at, and they'll move on. So it's having consistency of a group of people around you who's got your best interests, who can develop you in various ways, but also be honest with you and give you exactly what you need, where other people politically might not be able to talk to you and say the things what we say, but everything we say is to develop that individual, to get them to where they are striving to be.
Absolutely. And you know, it's really interesting because, like you mentioned, obviously, so that, you know, you worked at, you know, City and a lot of different clubs, Mark. You know, a lot of people have got the sort of dream to be a footballer. I don't know what the percentage is in terms of how many players go on to play pro football, whatever it's 0.01, depending on what you read. But in terms of that, I mean, you know, like from your perspective, what does it take? I mean, obviously, there's, like you mentioned, there's different variables: tactical, technical, psychological, physical, maybe right time, right place, really. But could you? I mean, I know obviously only share what you're comfortable sharing, but what do you sort of, what do clubs generally look at in players? I mean, what are they generally looking for in a player, Mark? Is it specific, or is it something like, you know, general, or?
Well, what I'll say is look, you know, every club's different, and from me, you know, I'll give you an example. So when you're in a building, you're in a program, you're, you know, working with a multidisciplinary team of people who've got the same aim, working for the same football club. You know, everyone's aligned similar in the way they work, the way they think, what the outcomes are going to be, and you know, doing what I've done and spending a lot of time over the last, say, 16 months travelling around the world, not just working in England, but travelling around the world, Thailand, America, you know, Scandinavia, Spain, Germany, Italy, Australia, you know, and looking at attributes of players and looking at, you know, what clubs are recruiting for. Well, the key things for me, and I'll say this, it doesn't matter what badge you've got in your chest. One is, you know, not even football, the way you are as a person, you know, how driven you are, you know, what you like when you first meet someone. You only get one chance to have a good first impression. You know, it sounds crazy, like the way you behave, the way you talk, your effort levels, you know, your willingness to learn, how open-minded you are. That's before we're even talking about how fast you can run, what position you play, you know, how you touch the ball, what assets you have as a player. Then the next bit is, you know, your desire to work. How hard are you working? You know, you can go into a football club and be given 6 amazing hours a week in a coaching program, but your best coach has to be yourself. So it's a balance between doing them extras. You know, extras are going to bed early. Extras are having the right diet. Extras are, you know, analysing what you do, being honest with what you're doing, knowing what you're doing. And for me, the big clubs, you know, talent is key. Talent is key. You know, physicality, technical ability, you know, technical competence, what you're physically able to do, what you're technically able to do. And the more variety you have and the more diverse skill sets you have in the technical area, in the tactical area, in the psychological area, and in the physical area, the more value you have as an individual to any football club. So, some people focus on hammering the gym. Some people focus on just being the sharpest with the ball. But, the bigger toolbox you've got, the bigger range of tools you've got, the more value you have and the more opportunity you have to solve problems on the football pitch. And for anyone who's young, who's looking to be a footballer, what I'd say is you have to be obsessed with developing every single area and having a range of skills within each of them areas.
And absolutely, I mean, obviously, sort of like, the key takeaway for me there, Mark, is you've got to dedicate yourself to giving it your best shot. I mean, is there sort of, a time in a player's life, do you think, Mark, where they find their level? Maybe they're sort of like, train and give it everything they've got. And like you said, there's a degree of talent comes into it. But you've worked with different levels of the game too, which is really, really fascinating for me. But is there sort of a point where a player can sort of find their level and kind of build from there, if that makes any sense? So
so for me, there's reality, yeah, and there's potential.
Yeah.
So you need to know, and you need to have a real honest account of where you're at now. For instance, over the years, I've had a variety of mentalities and approach from players and parents. So the people around the player, the child, the adult, whoever that is, the boy, the girl, do have a massive impact on how that person thinks. And there's a saying the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And what I'm saying is some people, they might have limitations. Like, you find players like, I will say this respectfully, there's a girl who plays for England, and I had her at City, I had her from a young girl. She's developed, she's playing for one of the biggest teams in the world. She's won Champions League, she's won this and this and this, and she's a girl who's just from Rochdale, who was a City fan, but she physically was never the fastest player.
Wow.
So what she had to do, she needed to have the fastest mind at problem solving. She needed to have the sharpest mind in regards to recognising what tools she needed to use. And when I say tool, everyone just thinks you say pass, dribble, shoot, running with the ball. Well, it's not, because there's a range of different skills and different ways of touching the ball. To have different methods to do that. And what she had, her technical and physical, technical and tactical and a physical areas were so high. It overtook anyone even questioning going physically. She's not able, because she was that sharp with her mind and her outcomes and her decision making and a final product with her action that no one could ever go physically. She needs to improve at this and this, because she made up for it in other areas now.
Yeah.
Some players are exceptional all round, which you look at people like, I'll say, if we're talking about the women's game, a Lucy Bronze, she could play with the men, and cause problems.
Absolutely.
And the way she moves, the way she touches the ball, how clever she is, how competitive she is, but there is other players who are playing at the highest level who might lack a certain area, and they upskill other areas even higher to balance out, so people can't give them a red flag in a certain area. And for anyone who's young, what I'd say is really break the game down into, know your strengths, and they're not weaknesses. Know your areas you can improve and attack them. But what you can't do is attack them all at once. You've got to be tactical in your methods. Got to be tactical in the way you train, and you got to be tactical in the way you're trying to develop yourself.
Yeah, absolutely, and there's some really, really key takeaways, obviously, from yourself, Mark, who's sort of been there, done that, and continues to do it as well. For anyone listening in, at any age, really, or any level, and I suppose these sort of skills as well, Mark, they're transferable, not just to football, but other sports and life in general, like business or just life. Sometimes gets tough, and you have to sort of get on that front foot. Otherwise the world isn't always an easy place to obviously yourself, you're well travelled, you've been around, and no doubt, you kind of, it mirrors life in a way where I think sometimes certain players think they're just going to, turn up and no one's going to give them the shirt, are they, Mark? I mean, a pro who's there, who's got the shirt, it's not going to say, "Oh, here you go, take my shirt, take me space," type thing. You got to have that hunger too.
What you find is, and I always used to say this at City was, or I say this now to players who are playing all over the world, and they are playing in World Cups, they're playing in Euros, they're playing in Champions Leagues. Some are being nominated for Ballon d'Ors, male and female, and the FIFA Team 11s. And what I'd say is them people, they know their body. They know what they need to do every single day, on a rest day, on an intense day, on a match day, how they need to prepare from literally, I'm talking about the moment they get out of bed, what they put in the mouth, to the first thing they do when they get out of bed, to what the priority is in the day, to make sure they're prepared, like psychologically, tactically, and also mentally. They're three different areas for me where, you're ready for the game, you're focused, you've got no problems in the day what are going to cloud your mind other than you're focusing on what you need to do. You feel fantastic because you're organised and you're prepared. And, it's really important that I always say this, like, you have days where there's certain things you can't affect, the weather, illness every now and again, you just can't help it, something sudden, trauma, tragedy, but what happens is, the more you work on a consistent cycle in your life, off the pitch, you'll become much better on the pitch. Certain people think you just give 100% on the pitch and you can do whatever you want off it. You have to be thinking 24/7 about how I can get better, how I can make a difference. And it's them 1%, Jimmy, innit?
Absolutely. 1%. Absolutely. But the thing with that, Mark, as well, I mean, you've seen players sort of make their way in the game from sort of, like youth academy to be pro. And what about when a player gets to the pro level? I mean, we've got loads of listeners that from different levels of the game, or even not involved in sport. But once you become a pro, I mean, what's your take on it there? I mean, the hard work. I mean, then the hard work begins, doesn't it? To be fair, in one sense, where sometimes people take their foot off the gas.
It's like it's that old analogy about climbing a mountain, innit?
Yeah.
You graph your I won't swear. You graph your socks off to get to where you want to be. You see where you're going, but then you achieve that. Once you've achieved that, some people go, "Oh, I'm here now. I've got a comfort blanket. I've got this for a period of time." And what I see at the big football clubs, these boys, especially the boys, these are signing deals for tens of thousands of pounds at 17. A lot of these boys are mothered. A lot of these boys, all they know is football. They don't know how to make a cup of tea. There's so many simple things in life which, they've not even got experience of turning a washing machine on, washing a pot. Some of them literally don't even have to pick the phone up or walk anywhere to get anywhere. They're picked up and dropped off. So what happens is, it's not just the boys or the girls who are local to the football clubs. It's the players who come from abroad as well, because they get these paydays. They move into these houses. They start to be treated a little bit more carefully, and there's a bit more cotton wool wrapped around them. And what happens is sometimes some of them can lose that drive, they can lose that discipline. Money has a massive factor, status, social media has a massive factor on mentality, and it's the ones who turn up every single day, like I said before, who know themselves, know the formula, what they need to turn up, or change the formula, tweak it, depending on how they feel or what they've got on the schedules, to be the best they can be and perform. It's around performance, nothing else. It's not how you look, it's not how many followers you've got, it's not about a brand giving you this. It's about when you cross that white line, you are performing, and when you come off that pitch, you couldn't have done any more, whether you played amazing or you've made some mistakes. And it's turning up every single day knowing you're doing the right thing. If you know you're doing that, you're going to be successful in life. And if it's not coming now, it will come. Do you know what I mean? And I say this to a lot of these young lads, or a lot of the young girls now, who are getting, real, big deals. That first day you walked in there and you felt nervous and you wanted to play every minute, and someone else is in your place and you've had to fight for that. As soon as you lose that mentality and that approach, someone else will have it, and it'll be a clock ticking until someone else takes your spot. And that's how competitive at the top.
Absolutely, 100%. That's some good takeaways there, Mark. And I mean, just sort of in terms of yourself, I mean, obviously, sort of like, you obviously your career in football as a footballer, for injury, it may not, reach where you wanted to go, but you turned your attention to coaching, became one of the top coaches in the world, and people listening into that, sometimes things don't go the way you want to go. You've got to just try and navigate and sort of go from there. And for our listeners, if anyone's sort of listening in, I know it's hard to give people advice because everyone's on their own journey, Mark, but if anyone's sort of listening in, may have been released from a football club and might be a bit down and sort of what are some thoughts maybe you can sort of share with them in terms of sort of moving forward?
I think what's key is, look, and I get it weekly, from children, from parents, from coaches, from agents, from footballers. I get it from other athletes who just networked and got to know. And what's key is look, we all have moments in our life where things don't go well, and I've been there myself, off the pitch, where I made a few wrong choices, got a few outcomes I didn't want, and that's part of life. That's part of learning. It's part of growing. Some people will be on a path where they probably will never ever make mistakes. Now, mistakes can come through pushing yourself, not knowing exactly where you're at. There's so many different factors what can cause that. But the key thing with football and any sport and anything in life, because football for me is life, in regards to certain situations transferring to other situations in life, is around mindset. It's around being resilient. It's around, look, the situation is the situation. You can't change it. But what you can change is your approach. Or what I always say is, you don't take no for an answer. If you take no for an answer and you're allowing someone to tell you you're not going to do this, you're not going to do that, well, if you don't believe in yourself, no one else is going to believe in you.
Definitely,
so what's really important is, you have your moment. We all have that moment. You can't let that period of time drag you down for too long. You've got to dust yourself off, and you've got to have that belief that you can be where you should be, and you've got the ability and the potential to get where you need to be. Bad news sometimes is the best thing what can ever happen to some people in their lives.
Definitely.
And what's key is do you know what? You have to be able to learn from it, and what you've got to be able to do as well is you've got to be able to see where the changes are. If you can't see where you need to make changes, and someone is trying to give you constructive criticism, then you will never get to where you want to be. So the key thing is focus, don't take no for an answer, and you've got to know yourself every single day that you are doing everything to get you where you want to be.
Absolutely. No, that's there's some sort of powerful takeaways there, Mark, for anyone, not just in football but in life in general. You might not be where you want to be, but the minute you sort of take no for an answer is the minute you're definitely not going to get there. That's for sure. And you go again type thing. And just sort of finally yourself, Mark, in terms of your own sort of journey. Obviously, you obviously sort of you're doing some incredible work and you've been everywhere around the world. And are you okay to share what your vision is going forward? I mean, only share what you feel comfortable sharing, but is it more the same?
Listen, I'm an open book, and I'm a true believer in I never thought I would have been on the journey I would have been on with football. There's certain things in my life I never thought would have happened, positive and negative. But do you know what? It's took me to the place where I am who I am now, and the person I am now is more knowledgeable, more rounded, has a better insight into a lot of things in life, much better understanding of myself as a person, as a coach, as a mentor, can easily recognise things a lot earlier because my eyes are open to the world. And for me, it's around, number one, being the best father I can be, setting examples for my son and my stepson to live a happy, healthy life. It's not around, success for me isn't around money or trophies. success is waking up every morning and wanting to attack the day, wanting to have, ambition, wanting to strive to achieve something which some people might think is unrealistic, but until you have a go, you never know.
Absolutely.
And with what I do with the individuals, with the people I mentor, and I work with as a consultant, I love being on the journey with some of them are in places which people could only dream of. But some people have been on the bumpiest rides to get to the top, and it's loyalty as well of keeping good people around you and trusting the process of if someone's got your best interest, stick with them, because there's certain people out there who they might only use you for a moment in their life, and what I figured out is, get good people around you, surround yourself with people who are like-minded, and whatever you're doing in life, whether you're employed, you're an athlete, you're a coach, you're striving to get to a certain level, whether you're in business, you're looking to start a business, you've got to have belief, you've got to learn, you've got to fail along the way, you've got to accept that's going to happen. But then once you get to a point where your knowledge of what you want to do and you become a specialist of the areas you're in, stay on track, don't get distracted, and give 100%. You can't do no more. Do you know what I mean? And
yeah.
That's me, Jimmy. That's me. And I've cut certain things out of my life, changed my life, changed the way I live, changed the way I eat, changed how much I don't even drink alcohol no more in my life. I talk about that. I've got no thingy in that, and that isn't because of any issue. That's because how productive and how how much I do in a day, my level of work, my pace of work. Some people can't work like that, and it's not because they've not got the capability. It's how they live their life and how they choose to live their life.
Absolutely. No, that's some sort of powerful stuff, Mark. I mean, you've been very kind to join us on the show. I know that listeners have found that really informative and fascinating. I certainly have. So I really want to thank you for coming on board the show. It's been really interesting speaking to you, and we wish you all the success. Carry on doing the great work that you are doing. So thanks again for your time, Mark. It's been great speaking to you on Salford City Radio, Friday Sports Show. Your host, Jimmy Petruzzi.